So I'm from the, as Emma said, Chartered Institute of Building Services Engineers. I've just recently joined. Let me just see, I'm just having an issue with changing my slides. There we go. So I recently joined CIBSE at the start of the year, so still understanding the groundwork. But what we do, our main aspect is to provide best practice advice and guidance to our CIBSE members who cover so building services covers everything that is essentially put into buildings. So my role there as research manager is really to try and link academia and industry by identifying knowledge gaps that industry recognise and trying to fill those gaps with academic research to prove and bolster our position and to improve our guidance for the industry. But as Emma said, that I'll be talking more today about the work I did previously at the BBSA, so the British Blinds and Shutters Association. So I did my PhD there, and then I'll also talk about CIBSE activities, what we've been working on with regard to predominantly overheating. So my PhD I basically did this case study in 2016, and just to give a bit of context, this was a little way before Part O was introduced of the building regs that looks at specifically overheating in new buildings, and also before TM59. So TM59 is a technical memorandum that CIBSE has and has been adopted partially by Part O, but also before that by the Greater London Authority in how to assess the risk. Something that we've spoken about in the last two presentations. So it really provides a methodology for defining that risk. And I think so, yeah, just a bit of background. So my PhD research also covered other aspects. I suppose I went into it just trying to better understand shading products and why they're considered sustainable. So we also looked at other aspects in terms of acoustics, how they impact people in offices, and their life cycle assessment to have some assurity that they are actually considered a sustainable product. So it was about this case study, so why we did it. So essentially we got a call. I'd literally just started my PhD, so I was still navigating the field of shading products and what to do. And one of our technical director at the BBSA, he got a call from a member having a severe overheating issue in their apartments. These apartments were being renovated, so they're in the middle of a change of use. So they're originally office blocks, and they were hoping to convert them into domestic apartments. So this was in North London. So the types of issues they were having during the renovation was that the toilet trap was drying out. So there was a distinct smell of sewage throughout the apartments. The new floor, newly laid floor that they'd installed had started peeling off. And obviously the developer was very concerned that these were going to be unacceptable conditions for anyone purchasing them. Which is sometimes rare that the developers are that concerned about the conditions. But we relished the opportunity. This developer was very responsible and approached one of the BBSA members to see what we could do in terms of mitigating that heat. So it provided an opportunity, a very rare opportunity, to go into an apartment block that was unoccupied and do some monitoring. So we went into this apartment that was just also southwest facing, had bedrooms on the glaze side. It was single aspect. So it highlighted a lot of warning flags that there could be a potential issue, which I know Susie will be talking more about in her presentation. And the whole goal was just to do some monitoring. So we took 4 of the apartments, 4 of the bedrooms, 2 in each of the apartments on the 2nd and 3rd floor, and monitored what we call is operative temperature. So operative temperature, unlike air temperature, considers mean radiant heat from the sun. So we use operative temperature. It's the metric used to define thermal comfort for people, as it's more representative of what a person actually feels, because it considers that radiant heat that you receive off the sun and is emitted off other surfaces. So it's the key metric to look out for when considering overheating assessments. We also, so the intent was is that we had these 4 apartments, one with no shading on the bedroom, and the other 3 had shading strategies applied to them. And we also implemented a nighttime ventilation strategy. So here's a little drawing of what the windows actually looked like on the front of the building. And as you can see, the apertures for the window openings were actually very small. I could barely reach the one at the top as well, so it made it quite hard. I had to get a stool to be able to stand on it and open it easily. And we implemented the strategy of that the windows would be open overnight, 4 p.m. till 8 a.m. The rationale behind this was that we assumed that a person leaving in the morning would probably close their windows for security reasons and then reopen them when they returned home from work. And also the fact that the builders had to shut the building at 5 o'clock, so we had to be out by 4. So these are the different types of shading strategies we implemented. So we tested 3 internal shading products. So an internal reflective screen blind, so it has this reflective coating on it to keep more of the solar gains out. An internal screen blind, and as you can see, you can actually get good views out of this. Probably not practical for bedrooms, considering you don't actually want people seeing in at night. But there are, when we're thinking of other spaces like living rooms, one of the concerns people have is that shading can make them seem very dark. So it allows another opportunity or a different product. And we also had an internal Venetian blind. In terms of external, we had external metal Venetian blinds and an external fabric. So I've just taken a couple of snapshots of some of the results. So I think, just bear with me. So on this day in August, the peak temperature, you can see it's written on the bottom right-hand side. So your peak external air temperature was 27.9 degrees. There was, and the non-shaded room reached a whopping 47.5 degrees without a blind. The internal shading was 32 degrees and the external shading was the coolest. So we had an 18-degree reduction with external shading and a 15.5 degree with the internal roller blind. So this was in August, obviously warmer temperatures. So a snapshot again on October. So we had 37 degrees in a no blind room and 24 degrees with internal shading and external shading, 21.5 degrees. So still we've got substantial reductions. And also noting that this happened in October, not necessarily considered the summer period. The reason for this, that we had such a hot event, is that the building was southwest facing, so we had a lot of solar gain coming in, because as we get into the autumn period, the angle of the sun lowers. So actually there was more solar gains coming directly into the apartments in October than there was in the summer when the sun is higher up in the sky. And as it was a part of my PhD work, we had to do some statistical analysis. So we compared the operative temperature range reduction. So effectively, what this analysis said is that with 95% confidence, we can say that internal shading reduced the operative temperatures by 8 to 13 degrees than a room without shading. And similarly, rooms with external shading would be 11 to 18 degrees cooler than a room without shading. But these findings are very much specific to this case study, given the glazing type, the size of the glazing, the layout of the property, the thermal mass. All these factors contributed to why this building was overheating so severely.
1 minute left, Zoe.
Oh, we're definitely going to have to skim. So we also did some analysis with TM52, and essentially this also proved that external shading was the most effective measure. So the key lessons we learned from this study was external shading was more effective and it was proven in principle. We had nighttime ventilation wasn't as beneficial in this case, mainly because we had such small windows. There are a combination of factors that resulted in the high prevalence of overheating, and buildings that change use are at risk of overheating, as well as those that are newly developed. and need retrofitting. So this is something that should really needs to be taken into consideration. And just finally, a quick update on what we're working on. So at the moment, we're updating weather files. So how we, I think both the previous presenters have mentioned the weather files and how they use them to manage risk. So we're currently working on updating these to the new UK CP18 projections. We're hoping to publish these by the end of the year. Similarly, we're updating TM59, which is the methodology used to assess overheating risk and is referred to in Part O and by the GLA. So there's a few bullet points there on how we're updating that. But I'm happy to discuss that in more detail with anyone that's interested. A couple of other research activities. So the one that I think might be most interesting is starting a PhD with Loughborough, looking at the barriers to installing external shading. And this kind of comes on to, I put together 2 calls for action. One, to learn about various different types of shading, because I think there's a lot of people see them as unattractive. There's only shutters that block out a lot of light, but there's actually quite a wide range. The Good Homes Alliance has a great guide on this. There's a link in the top right hand corner. And also a request really to find out what your requirements are in installing external shading to existing buildings. Do they make sense? And this is really to help inform the PhD we're working with to try and identify the barriers of installing external shading more on UK homes. And that was it.